Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to take a minute or two and wait for more people to continue to trickle in. So get yourself situated, get comfy. Very excited to learn with you all in a few moments. Hello, everyone. Welcome so much for joining us today for Torah as a Light, Wisdom Through the Darkness. Today, we're going to be learning with Leon Morris, the president of Pardes. Very, very excited to have you here today, Leon. A few things before we begin our learning together. Um, Usually, this is where I would share an update from Pardes in Jerusalem, but I'm going to leave that to Leon to share once I turn things over to him. And as usual, today we're going to begin with a dedication of today's learning. We want to dedicate this learning today and the learning in this whole series to the loved ones in the Pardes family who have been called into service in Israel. You'll see that Jordan just posted a link in the chat to the full list of names of folks that we are dedicating today's learning to that we know of. And I also want to invite all of you to share in the chat now the names of anyone additional that you would like to dedicate your learning to personally today. So while you are sharing those names in the chat, we're going to take 30 seconds now in silence to set an intention for our learning. I invite you to sit in silence with me now. Thank you all again so much for being here with us today. The source sheet is going to be shared on screen as well as a link provided in the chat. And now I'm going to turn it over to Leon. Thank you so much.
There we go. Welcome, everybody. A brief update about Pardes. We're really emboldened by the fact that the majority of our students stayed in Jerusalem. The majority of our year program students and our Pardes teacher fellows and our Pardes experiential educators students. And there was a group that went abroad. About 20 of our students, and more than half of them are coming back to join us on Sunday. So we've been very encouraged by this notion of Talmidei Chachamim Marvim Shalom Ba'olam, that students of Torah increase peace in the world, and that's what we're doing. And we're still here, and we're learning, and we're building community together. The students, of course, are engaged in a lot of volunteering. And our esteemed former faculty member, David Levincross, has come back on board to help coordinate some of that volunteer activity. And I think that if you spoke to any of our students who are here right now, they would say that this is a very purposeful time, that they feel like they're here at a moment of significance in Jewish history and Israeli history. So thank God, that's giving us all a lot of encouragement, and that's enabling us to support our faculty. Many of the names that were linked just a moment ago, their children and their spouses, and of course, we have in mind every day uh, Hirsch Goldberg Poland, the son of our colleague Rachel Goldberg, um, and are praying for his release and the release of all the other hostages. I want to look tonight with you at the prayer for the state of Israel and really at just one phrase. But to get there, I just want to provide a little bit of context. Jews have been praying for the countries that they live in since at least the 14th century. That's what we know from manuscripts and then early printed editions of Sidurim. And the idea of praying for the country in which you live in is rooted in these verses by Yirmiyahu, the prophet Jeremiah. If you look at verse 7, V'dirshu et shlom ha'ir asher higleti etchem shama, v'hitpalalu va'ada el Hashem, ki v'shloma yihiyeh lechem shlom. So you pray, seek the welfare of the city where I have exiled you, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its prosperity you shall prosper. And that gave way to a formula for praying for the government that really worked until we get to America. Jordan, if you can just scroll down, the general form of it, the Hebrew fell off of my copy here, but it begins with the words Hanotein Teshua L'Malachim. May he who, which is taken from the book of Psalms, may God who gives salvation to kings and dominion to princes, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, who delivered his servant David from the evil sword, who made a way in the sea and a path through the mighty waters, bless and protect, guard and help, exalt, magnify and uplift. And then you would put the name of the emperor or the king, or in this case, Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, whoever it is. And this is still more or less the formula used around the world. It didn't work in America. America had to come up with a different form of praying for the government because there wasn't a sovereign for whom we needed to pray. It needed to be a prayer of we the people. And the historian Jonathan Sarna has written a beautiful article about how we had to invent a prayer for America. But that was in the 18th century. And I want to bring us to the 20th century, because when you get to Jewish sovereignty in the land of Israel, then for sure the formula of the way in which we prayed for the governments that protected us from the 14th century on, that doesn't fit with Jewish sovereignty, with a Jewish homeland. So it's a real question of what kind of prayer should we be saying for the state of Israel. This was a good problem and a new question in Jewish life. And the state, as we know, was declared on May 14th, 1948. And on September 20th of that year, the newspapers published the following prayer, which is familiar to many of us, but I want you to see it in the form in which it occurred in the newspaper. And it occurred, this is from a paper called Hatzofeh, The Scout. And it's an anonymous group. Before the prayer, it says that the chief rabbis of the land of Israel, here it actually attributes it to Rav Herzog and Rav Uziel, respectively the chief Ashkenazi and the chief Sephardi rabbi, that they issued this prayer. It doesn't actually say who wrote the prayer, And we know today that it was written by Rav Herzog, and it was improved upon by the Nobel laureate writer Shai Agnon. There's a whole mystery that if we had more than a half hour, it's a whole drama of decades of wondering, did Agnon write the prayer? Did Rav Herzog write the prayer? So we know now, we've put the different clues together, and we know that it was written by Rav Herzog and improved upon by, as I said, by Shai Agnon. Many people call this the kind of religious Declaration of Independence. And there's so much in this, but I want to focus on one line, and Jordan will go to the regular font version after the way it appears in the newspaper, and this has nikud in it. And I want to focus on what is the fourth line of the Hebrew here. Avinu Shebashamayim Tzur Yisrael v'Goalo Barech et Medinat Yisrael Reishit Smichat Gulatenu. The beginning of the flowering or blossoming of our redemption. Now, this phrase was, interestingly, this was not, as many people believe for a long time, a phrase that Agnon added. This was in the original of Rav Herzog. And the phrase was already an established phrase, more or less. Rav Kook, the first chief rabbi of pre-state Israel, of Palestine, referred to the Balfour Declaration of 1917 as Reshit Smichat Yeshuatenu, the beginning of the blossoming of our salvation. Very close to the phrase here. In 1947, Rav Herzog wrote to a fellow Zionist leader, and he wrote, "Blessed be God that we've reached this stage, even though it is still only the beginning of redemption, or perhaps only the beginning of redemption." And the phrase that he used was a mix of Aramaic and Hebrew. He said, "Thank God that we've arrived at this time that is achalta de geula, the beginning of redemption, or achalta de geula, the beginning of redemption." Now, this phrase occurs again, September 20th, 1948, and there is immediate objection to this phrase in the prayer by other religious leaders in Israel. The Lubavitcher Rabbi and others suggested that we are delaying redemption by declaring that the state of Israel is the beginning of the flowering of our redemption. And this early debate about how could they have used this phrase, Reshit Smichat Gulatenu, the first flowering of our redemption, prompted a change 3 weeks later in which an additional line was added. And that line is here. And that's what I put in italics in the English, toward the bottom. Thank you, Yardain. And in the Hebrew, I'll just read it. In the English, you see the italics. "And swiftly send us your righteous anointed one, your righteous Messiah, the one of the house of David, to redeem those who long for your salvation." It's italicized in the Hebrew as well, but it's harder to see. "Ushlach lanu mehera ben David, Mashiach tzidkecha, liftot mechakeketz Yeshuatecha." So 3 weeks later, that's printed, and the chief rabbis declare that it was a printing error on September 20th, that those extra lines were meant to be, that they were part of the original text, and they should have been included. Now, what's going on? This line, added 3 months later, to quell the protest over seeing Israel as the beginning of the flowering of our redemption, or neutralizing that phrase is meant, obviously, to restore the sense of, well, yeah, the state of Israel might be the beginning of the flowering of our redemption, but we're still waiting for the Messiah. And you can see, I don't know if you've noticed this before in just reciting, if this is the form of the prayer that's recited in your synagogue. There's a lot of other forms out there, but this is the classic, this is the original. And I want to underscore today the way in which these lines are really in tension. That if Israel is Reshit Smichat Geulatenu, that's one situation. I'm going to ask you about it in a moment. And if we're waiting for Messiah, that's a different situation. Now, I'm not saying they're not reconcilable. And obviously, when they issued the quote unquote correction 3 weeks later, they felt that these were complementary. But I want to explore this. I want to explore this today. And first, I want to emphasize, well, let me ask you actually, and let's do this just because of we have such limited time. In your own words in the chat, what's the essence of saying that Israel is Reshit Smichat Geulatenu, the first flowering of our redemption, or the beginning of the flowering of our redemption? If you had to say it in the most pedestrian, simple language, what might you say? And I'll just read some of these out. You just want to put it in the chat. To say that Israel is Reshit Smichat Geulatenu, the beginning of the flowering of our redemption, what's being said? Israel brings us together and keeps us together. Beautiful, beautiful. It focuses more on having Israel than actions of the people. Okay, I see what you mean. That Israel by its existence is leading us toward it as opposed to behavior. One step closer to Mashiach, right? Okay, we're going to come back to that in a moment when we look at Rambam's definition of Mashiach and Zman HaMashiach. We need to have self-determination in order for redemption to come. Good. It brings God into the center stage, right? This Zionist experiment isn't an accident of history, that this has in it the hand of God. The process of redemption has begun, and it was initiated by people. Now, that is really central here, right? Because if we're contrasting it with the line about Mashiach, then we're saying the whole idea of Zionism is that we have to take this bold step. It's about human agency. It's about initiative. It's not the classic Talmudic text that we're waiting and that we can't force the hand of God, and that this is one of the oaths that we won't come back to the land of Israel en masse without Mashiach. No, we're saying, no, we have to take history into our own hands. That's what Zionism is in a certain way, is that Jews become actors in history now. We're no longer passive in history. The government self-determination is a prerequisite for Mashiach. Great. These are beautiful responses. I want us to be attentive to the fact that these words, and maybe, Jordan, if you don't mind just scrolling up to the beginning again, the words themselves are very tentative, right? It's not saying this is redemption, and it's not even saying this is the flowering of our redemption. And here, I'm sorry I put in this translation because I want to be very literal here. It's 2 steps away from our redemption. It's the beginning of the flowering or blossoming of our redemption. It is tentative. There is a degree of modesty here, and it incorporates many of the comments that were said. This is about human agency. This is about It begins with us. It's about having Jewish sovereignty that makes redemption possible. So I want to share, this is an article I just read recently, even though it was written 2.5 years ago, by a brilliant academic who just gave a shiur klali, a standalone class at Pardesniks on Tuesday, Nadav Schiffman Berman. And he wrote in an article in Tablet, the phrase, the beginning of the growth of our redemption, is a moderate and hesitant reading of Zionist messianism. In this reading, Jews are all sovereign and responsible to shape the future of Jewish peoplehood and the Zionist project. I love that. I love that. And Lisa, Rabbi Lisa, I'm happy that you shared that the Masorti, the conservative Siddur in Israel, adds another tentative phrase, which is Tehei Reshut Reshit Smichat Gulatenu, that it should become the beginning of the flowering of our redemption. But even the classic text has this moderate, I like that Nadav calls it a moderate and hesitant reading of Jewish messianism. And I think part of the debate here, let's say, between those who thought it was sacrilege to call the state of Israel the beginning of the flowering of our redemption, those who insisted on adding the line about Mashiach ben David, I think it hinges on, well, what do you mean by redemption, right? What's the meaning of redemption? So let's go to the next text. And Maimonides says, who has a very modest understanding of the time of the Mashiach. For Maimonides, as opposed to other Jewish thinkers, it's not about the lion lying down with the lamb. There is no supernatural transformation of our world. It simply means when sovereignty of the land of Israel goes back to the people of Israel and the Jewish people return to the land. So we could say, in that kind of understanding of what is Geula, what is redemption, then in 1948, you can declare it. You could be even less hesitant on this basis than to say the beginning of the flowering of our redemption. We could say this is it. This is Mashiach. But of course, it wanted to be more tentative. And I think part of that is this aspirational outlook that we're not there yet. That even adopting this gradual, incremental form of redemption allows still for us to aspire to be more as a country and as a people than we currently are. And I think it's a helpful phraseology. It will be 75 years from now a helpful phraseology to say Reshit Smichat Gulatenu. We have bigger and better dreams for who we want to become as a nation, and we're not completely there yet. And it still is not the added lines. It's still not, well, it's very nice to have a Jewish state, but let's wait for Mashiach. And yet it's still aspirational, which made me think of this famous line from Franz Kafka: the Messiah will come only when he is no longer necessary. He will come only on the day after his arrival. He will come not on the last day, but on the very last. I think this is partly about human beings bringing Mashiach by our actions, by the kind of society that we create. Now, I want to say something, though, in defense of adding the line about Mashiach ben David. You might have sensed until now that I'm a big fan of Reshit Smichad Gulatenu, and I part of me doesn't care for this insertion 3 weeks later to come back to Mashiach as an individual. But true confessions, I want to share that I am beginning to have a more complex and more a point of view that's intention. I love this idea of human agency and the Jewish people taking history into its own hands and creating a society which is redemption. And especially at a moment like we're in right now, I have great appreciation for the notion that there are problems and challenges that we face that may just be too big for us. And I see that line of Mashiach, of send us ushlach lanu ben David Mashiachenu, Mashiach tzidkecha, send us the descendants of King David, your Messiah, as a way of saying, this is a lot. This might be more than we're capable of solving. And I find it, I don't want to have just a theology of send us your Messiah, but I also don't want and can't have just a theology of we're taking the bull by the horns and we're building society and it's all us. And I think particularly in a moment of war and a moment of challenge, and when we look at what's called here Yom Sha'acharei, what happens the day after, we could use Mashiach right now. We could use the wisdom of leadership that we simply don't have. And I'm reclaiming that extra line that was put in 3 weeks later. And I want to live in that tension of this blessing between Israel being Reshit Smichat Gulatenu and saying, Ushlach lanu mehera ben David Mashiach tzidkecha, send us the Messiah. Thank you so much. I'm going to read the comments in the chat, and I think we just have a minute and a half left, so I'm going to turn it back to Jordan and to Haley.
Thank you so much, Leon. This is a really fascinating exploration, and I'm so grateful. I'm sure we're all so grateful to have had the privilege of learning with you today.
I'm so grateful to have this opportunity to learn with you. Thank you.
Yeah. And Bracha, I see your hand. I think maybe we can send out Leon's email afterwards, so you can ask your question then. But we're going to close out because we just have a minute left. So thank you all for coming, whether this is your first class with us in this series or you've been here all along. We're really grateful that you take the time out of your day to learn with us. Our series is continuing for the next couple of weeks. We'll be meeting back here at the same time on Monday for a shiur with Rav Meg Foyer on what is Jewish heroism. So we hope to see you then. And next Thursday, of course, is Thanksgiving, so we won't be meeting then. But we hope to see you on Monday. And thank you again, Leon. Thank you all, and wishing you all an early Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom and Besorot Tovot.